Hey, what's up, everybody? Tommy Meyer here. Welcome to Tommy Tonight. Now, ladies and gentlemen, it's time for a gerrymandering alert. Woo, 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 woo. I didn't have time to get the sound effect. As you know, every 10 years, states must redraw their congressional maps to account for population changes. And every 10 years, politicians take advantage of the process to try and cement their own power. This graphic right here is a good example of how it works. This is a hypothetical state with 50 voters. 30 of them are Democrats, 20 are Republican. Now, by drawing the district lines horizontally here, Democrats are able to ensure that they win all 5 seats, even though they're only 60% of the population. But by drawing this little Tetrisy guy over here, Republicans, despite being a minority in the state, would still win a majority of the seats. And I'm also pretty sure one of those rows would just disappear. Is that why states lose seats? Anyway, the process is already underway this year, and already we've seen some doozies of a gerrymander. Let's start with Texas. Everything's bigger in Texas, including Republicans' balls. Makes you wonder why their vaccination rate's so low. I'm kidding. The vaccine does not make your testicles enlarged, okay? I don't care what Nicki Minaj's cousin's uncle's friend, whatever says. YouTube, don't take this video. It's not in misinformation, okay? Listen. Anyway, Republicans have big balls. Because Republicans in Texas are on the brink of passing a map that would cement their own power for the next decade. Texas gained 2 congressional seats in this year's reapportionment, the most of any state, and a lot of that is thanks to people of color. In fact, voters of color drove 95% of the state's population growth, with Hispanics counting for up to half. Yet, Republicans managed to draw a map that has 0 new majority Hispanic or majority black districts. And not only do Republicans not draw any new Hispanic or black districts, they actually reduce the number of districts in which Hispanics make up a majority of the eligible voters from 8 to 7, and the districts in which black Texans make up a majority of eligible voters from 1 to 0. And that is going to get them a nice, shiny new lawsuit for violating the Voting Rights Act. Now, digging into the map, I have to admit that they have some pretty creative districts, like this little guy connecting Austin to San Antonio, or this one, the little almost donut here around the Houston area. But I want to zoom in really quick to the Dallas-Fort Worth area because it's a good example of how gerrymandering works. This is what the presidential vote looked like in the area in 2020, and here is what the districts look like. Yeah, you see that? Look at that. Yeah. Look at how perfectly that lines up with where Democratic voters are. They are able to pack all the Democratic voters into that really creative-looking districts there that connects Dallas and Fort Worth. Biden won Tarrant County, which encompasses Fort Worth, by just narrowly, and he won Dallas by over 30 points. Yet, Republicans' map would cut up the counties into 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 Republican districts and 1, 2, 3 Democratic districts. Now, Democrats are at a disadvantage because their voters tend to not be spread out very efficiently like Republicans, but that's not what's happening here. You could easily draw a more proportional map. In fact, here's what a more proportional map might look like. This map would result in 1, 2, 3, 4 Democratic districts and 1, 2, 3 Republican districts, which I would argue much more accurately represents the voters in the area. Now, not only are there no competitive districts in those counties, there's only one competitive district in the entire state. Remember, this is a state Trump only won by 5 points, but out of 38 districts, there's one with a partisan lean less than 7%, and most of the districts lean at least 20% towards either Republicans or Democrats. Republicans would be expected to win at least 24 out of the state's 38 seats, more than 63%, even though Trump only won 52% of the vote, giving the new map a partisan bias 11.5% in favor of Republicans. Now, I'm going to get a little wonky here for a second, so just hold on. I want to talk about the efficiency gap. Efficiency gap is a way of measuring partisan gerrymandering by looking at the number of wasted votes for each party. A vote is considered wasted when it doesn't contribute to a candidate's victory, or when it's cast for Jill Stein. Basically, anything over 50% doesn't contribute to the candidate's victory. If you win 51% of the vote, you win. If you win 52% of the vote, you still win. Now, you might as well have voted for Jill Stein. The difference between each party's wasted votes is called the efficiency gap, and experts consider an efficiency gap above 7% to be an indicator of a gerrymander. Texas's efficiency gap? 15 Jill Steins, or 15%, favoring Republicans, more than twice the threshold that constitutes a gerrymander. Now, of course, Texas is not the only state redrawing their maps to be completely fair, and Republicans are not the only ones who gerrymander. Take Oregon, for example. Democrats are in charge in Oregon, and they recently enacted a map that would result in them winning at least 4 out of the state's 6 seats, or 67%, despite the fact that Biden only won 56.5% of the vote in 2020. And here's how they do it. Basically, they split Portland's voters into 4 different districts, all of which lean blue. And if that doesn't work, they can just throw all the people they don't want to vote into unmarked vans. Remember that? That was fun. Anyway, Georgia also has released a first draft plan, and theirs is the defensive gerrymander. It protects incumbents, giving Republicans 9 out of the state's 14 seats. We all remember just how close Georgia was last time around. And though Ohio Republicans have not released a map yet, they did release a letter saying that they believe they deserve to win 81% of the state's seats. In case you're wondering, no, they do not get anywhere close to 81% of the statewide vote. We know how that's going to go. But of course, there also are successes, like in Colorado, where there's an independent redistricting commission. They approved a map that has 4 Democratic seats and 3 Republican seats, with 1 highly competitive seat. Arizona's redistricting commission has released a number of plans, all of which look pretty fair. And then there's Michigan. Sweet, sweet Michigan. Michigan's independent redistricting commission has proposed 22 maps. You see, Michigan's constitution has a requirement for partisan fairness. The problem is Democrats in Michigan have a geography problem. Their voters are really concentrated in urban centers, whereas Republican voters are much more efficiently spread out. That's why the commission's first couple of maps heavily favored Republicans, but slowly they were able to make things more fair. Michigan has now narrowed it down to 4 maps, so they are making progress. But this does beg the question. If you're gerrymandering in order to make things more fair, you're kind of still gerrymandering, right? It kind of defeats the purpose. You're still predetermining the outcome. And that's the problem inherent in our winner-take-all single-member plurality system. We haven't always elected members of Congress this way. It's only actually since 1967, the Summer of Love, that we've required single-member districts. Apparently, Congress had enough of polygamy that year. It's a wild year in Congress. Wild. What happens in Congress affects all of us. It doesn't stay in Congress at all. But for much of our history, the states would elect their representatives either at large, meaning through one big statewide election that elects multiple members, or through multi-member districts. So Virginia, for instance, instead of having 11 districts with 11 separate elections, you would have 3 districts. 1 with 5 members, and 2 that elect 3 members each. And there's actually a bill in Congress right now called the Fair Representation Act that would do just that. It would create what's called a ranked choice proportional voting system. And if that sounds really confusing, let me explain it the way that Bill de Blasio explained ranked choice voting to New Yorkers. Basically, you rank your favorite pizzas, and the ones that get less votes get eliminated. Except unlike in New York, where you only get to elect one pizza, in this system, you get to elect multiple pizzas. So you get your pepperoni, your Hawaiian, your clam for some reason. I don't even know how to eat that. Essentially, you have more pizza, okay? In fact, that's what they should call it, the Multiple Pizza Act. Everyone likes more pizza, unless it's from Tony's. Tony's sucks. Tony's. Tony's is the worst. Hey. Tony's. And Tony, if you're watching, if that is your real name, you, okay? You're in Brooklyn. How do you fuck that up? I've had better pizza in Vermont. By the way, I'm not talking about Tony's Pizza at 336 Knickerbocker Avenue, okay? They're great. Tony's is they're fine. I'm talking about Tony's Pizza, 443 Knickerbocker Avenue. That Tony's. That Tony's is like the Paul Gosar of pizza. It's awful. But also it's like not really bad enough to be interesting. It's just, what's the point? The other Tony's is more like John McCain. You know, it's not everyone's cup of tea. It's not always going to agree with you, but you respect it. Anyway, I was talking about pizza. So the Fair Representation Act. The Fair Representation Act would create a proportional ranked choice voting system. But to be honest, it doesn't look like that act's going anywhere anytime soon. Short of that, there's the Freedom to Vote Act, which the Senate Democrats actually introduced last month and are going to vote on next week. The Freedom to Vote Act puts a statutory ban on partisan gerrymandering and creates strict standards of fairness that maps need to meet. It would also create an expedited judicial process which allows someone to challenge a map within 30 days of it being enacted, and includes what's called a rebuttal presumption. That basically means that a judge has to hold a hearing within 15 days, and if there's a presumption that the challenge will succeed, they can issue a stay and stop the state from using that map. Essentially, it would end partisan gerrymandering. It would be an absolute game changer. But we're running out of time. Filing deadlines for candidates are fast approaching, and primary season is already upon us. Texas, because of course it's Texas, holds the nation's first primary on March 1st. And as more candidates file for races, as primaries get closer, it's going to be harder and harder and more unreasonable to be changing around maps. We likely need to get this thing passed within the next month or so. Otherwise, it's going to be too late, and we're going to be in for another decade of Tony's Pizza. I swear to God, I will move to Vermont. Also, they only have one congressional district, so I don't have to worry about gerrymandering, so suck it. That's all the time I got for you. I'm Tommy Meyer, and I will see you next week. Thanks so much for watching. Let me know what you think of my videos by commenting down below. And if you like what you see, make sure you subscribe to me on the YouTube or share this with a friend. The possibilities are 3. Good night.